Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's edition of Saturday's edition of Weekend Waypoints, a production of SEC Extra and D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy. I'm going to take you through a rain-affected Friday around the SEC. My goodness, was it affected by rain? And then we'll take a peek ahead at Saturday's games where, spoiler alert, still some weather, chances of weather playing a role, but we'll see what the day brings. Before we get to anything specific, though, I have to remind you that this episode of Weekend Waypoints and every episode of Weekend Waypoints this season is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors, which is your new home for Jordan Brand. Gear up today and take flight. Make your play in the latest head-to-toe Jordan gear for the entire family, available in-store and at academy.com. Unleash your greatness with Jordan Brand, now at Academy. All right, folks. Eventful Friday. Not just that we had rain, but there was some dramatics when it came to the rain. It turns out that the folks in Starkville actually look like the winners of the day because they just called it early that, hey, we're not even going to bother. We're just going to call this thing. Probably the most dramatic piece of it was Tennessee and Auburn starting for some reason and then having to shut it down after a half inning, which of course made it to where Liam Doyle took the mound and threw, I don't know, whatever it was, 12, 15 pitches. And then, Sam Dutton didn't end up taking the mound, which, I understand the inherent unfairness of that, but that's the risk you take when you choose to start that game, and I think everybody online saw, was part of this discourse last night, but, ultimately it's the home team's decision to take the field. The home team kind of controls that. And if you knew there was a risk of that happening, like that's the risk you're taking when you start that game, that something like that could happen. And it did. And so a couple things. Auburn hit a 2-run homer. Ike Irish put a couple runs on the board, but it's up for debate whether the ball actually went out. It was hard to see because of the rain. Tennessee chose not to review it. And Dalton Bargo, who was the outfielder closest to the home run, didn't seem to really put up much of a stink, which is probably part of why it wasn't challenged. And maybe he didn't see it clearly, right? So anyway, moral of the story, just kind of a mess in Knoxville last night with starting that game. And they moved it up and then they had to move it back. And then they just kind of, it almost felt like just stubbornly started it. Like, we're just going to start it and see what happens, right? And so now you are where you are, and basically playing a doubleheader minus a half inning today is Tennessee and Auburn. So we'll get to the game of the day real quick. I see your comments rolling in. I appreciate those. We'll get to those in just a minute here. Game of the day, though, was Oklahoma 2, Ole Miss nothing. Let me share my screen out here. Just 5 games in the league last night because of the rain and what have you. 2-0 win there. Kyson Witherspoon was great. 7 innings, 1 hit allowed. Was outdueled Hunter Elliott. I mean, Hunter Elliott pitched well too. You could see down here. I mean, 6 2/3 pretty strong innings, as is kind of the case with Hunter Elliott. Walk total is a little higher than you'd like it. That's just kind of who he is as a pitcher. But he pitched well enough to win. Just his offense couldn't get anything done against Kyson Witherspoon, and that's just kind of how it goes. So able to minimize Oklahoma was, as we flip over to their stats, able to minimize who they used out of the bullpen. Bowden just threw 5 pitches. He'll certainly be able to go again this weekend. Crooks probably as well on Sunday, really. It's just 17 pitches from him. So a good job to minimize the number of pitches they had to throw to get that done. So big win for Oklahoma. Just a rally in the 5th led to 2 runs. RBI fielder's choice, RBI single, and there you have it. And like I said, a big win for Oklahoma as they look to play some home baseball in June. This series feels like a very pivotal one in that race, both for Ole Miss and for Oklahoma in that regard. A big win there for the Sooners. All right, I'm going to close out. We'll get over to some comments here. All right, what do we got? I have to go back to the beginning here. There we go. Hunter Fornette on X says, crazy what happens when Texas has to play a team with a pulse outside of Texas. Yeah, I mean, we kind of knew this was a spot where Texas could get got, right? Toughest road series they've had. The road schedule for Texas in the league has not been as difficult as most others. And That's just kind of how it works, right? Somebody's going to get the draw, the fortunate draw and the unfortunate draw in that league. And Texas did, and they've taken advantage, but they've clearly run into, I mean, A, it's a tough road environment in Fayetteville. And then B, I think they've just run into an Arkansas team that has bounced back from a few tough weeks in a row and is playing really good baseball right now. So I think it's that, I think, is the biggest factor, is Arkansas is just playing super well. But also, also it is just kind of like, hey, this was just going to happen. Like I still was saying pretty consistently that I think Texas is going to probably hit a speed bump on the way to the postseason, because that just always happens in this league. It's hard to go through 10 weekends without having one where you just kind of get outplayed in all facets. And it seems like that's what we're seeing now in Fayetteville for Texas and Arkansas. And if you're looking for a silver lining for Texas, it's part of it is that, look, this was a Thursday through Saturday, so you can get home. You've got, the Sunday off. It gives you a little more time to reset and kind of get ready to go for the following weekend. Mark S. relatedly says Texas should still be number one, and I don't even like those guys. They very well might. I can't speak for everyone else. Kind of depends on what else happens this weekend, et cetera. But I think that will be a real debate, given that they built so much of a buffer within the pecking order of the SEC, and so it would probably, if LSU wins their series, probably come down to LSU versus keeping Texas at number one. And between the fact that Texas has the head-to-head there and the fact that Texas got off to such a strong start in the league, it would be a real debate. Again, I can't speak for everyone else because I'm not the only one involved in those discussions, but I imagine that will be a debate, but we'll have to see what happens the rest of the weekend. Jim Dillingham says, nice shutout by Kyson and saved by Dylan Crooks over Ole Miss last night. Sooners start to get revenge for losing the Natty series in Omaha in 22. # Spike was safe. Fun stuff there, Jim. Yeah, just a great outing by Kyson, like I mentioned earlier. Just couldn't have asked for any more from him. And Dylan Crooks has continued to be about as good a stopper as we have in the SEC, kind of somewhat quietly, because he has good stuff and good numbers. The numbers are very good, but the strikeout numbers specifically are, he's not striking out 2 batters an inning, right? So I think sometimes, especially relievers, get overlooked if you're not striking out a bunch of dudes. And Crooks has good strikeout numbers, but they're not crazy, right? All right. Liz says Tennessee versus Auburn already delayed 45 minutes at least this morning. Yeah. That's part of it too. And I have to imagine, and I've not read anything about it this morning yet, but I have to imagine that was part of the motivation. If we're going to give a charitable read on the situation, that they saw the forecast for tomorrow and was like, we might need to just try to squeeze this in today and see how far we can get, because tomorrow doesn't necessarily look any better. So it wouldn't surprise me if that was part of the calculus that just didn't go their way, right? But again, that's the most charitable way I could probably pose it, because otherwise it doesn't make a ton of sense. But all right, Caleb Falk says, not super excited about the doubleheader today. The Aggies have had some success with them. LSU is going to have to come to play. Yeah, totally agree. The Aggies, I mean, their season turned around with the doubleheader, right, against Tennessee in that series. And so, yeah, the doubleheaders can be weird and wonky, but but it has worked in the Aggies' favor in that regard. So, and also, I just don't think any team wants to have to deal with a doubleheader. They're just such a headache, and there's so many variables. So, yeah, you got to do what you got to do. That's certainly not a criticism of the decision to go doubleheader. That was the right decision, but it just does make life a little bit more difficult for everyone involved. Hank from Texas says Arkansas woke up big time this weekend. Totally agree. This is kind of what we've been waiting for. Even with the 3 straight series losses, Arkansas hadn't been swept. They were still, it wasn't like anything had really fallen off, right? They were still playing fairly well. They weren't, getting run off the field necessarily. So I was still in on them, but it's like, okay, but we need to start seeing some victories, right? To award that faith and to reward that faith. And they've done so this weekend. Sean Miller says, glad you got here. I was out of coffee and about to go split firewood. And where's the fun in that? Yeah, I'm glad you didn't have to go split firewood, Sean. That'd been That'd been no fun. Yeah, went to breakfast with some family this morning, so I was a little bit late getting back to the show, but I'm glad you hung on. Mark says head to toe Jordan gear, what a nightmare. I mean, not for me, but people like the Jordan stuff, man. That stuff is popular. Jeremy Scott with a roll tide, a tough one yesterday against Vanderbilt, Jeremy, but perhaps a bounce back in the cards. Hank from Texas, Irish is a stud. Is he going draft this year? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think I think he's a draft guy. The question is going to be the team that drafts him. How committed are they to trying him at catcher versus just saying, hey, let's send him out as an outfielder? He's a good athlete. He could play outfield at the next level, could play first base at the next level. I think he's going to get a shot to catch, but I do think if that was his professional future, he'd be doing more of that now. Some of it was the injury he dealt with. He's, in the last couple of years, he's been kind of nicked up and what have you. So I think that's part of the decision to play him more at other positions. But if he was just a no doubt pro catcher, going to play 10 years in the big leagues kind of catcher, I think he'd be doing more of that now. But as it is, his bat's carrying him and the bat is plenty good. So to answer your question, Hank, I think he's going to be a relatively high draft pick and have a chance to, he's got a chance to be a big leaguer for sure. Sean says, be interesting to see if the t-shirt Texas fans show up after the Ozark shellackings. That is Sean asking that, not Joe, just for the record. Mark says, Joe, what is going to happen with Doyle for Tennessee? Yeah, I think you just gotta eat it. It sucks, but unless you want to bring him back maybe on Sunday for a relief outing, let's say that series is in question on Sunday in a rubber match. Can you bring him back to throw an inning or two? Probably, if you really need to, but I think mostly you just have to. Mostly Tennessee just has to eat it and say, look, that didn't work out in our favor. Like I almost cursed you. I don't know if I can cuss on these or not, but crap happens. Let's just put it that way. And it just was an unfortunate situation last night and somewhat of Tennessee's own doing, right? Because ultimately the decision to play came down to them, and you can quibble about whether the umpires should have made them play another half inning, if that was even on the table. Whatever. Like, I'm not really interested in relitigating it too much, but I think you just got to kind of consider him burned unless you're in a tight spot on Sunday. Hogs on the Hill on X says Texas 100% wasn't prepared for Arkansas, and Arkansas was living rent-free in Texas's head last night. Certainly, Arkansas has outplayed Texas in a big way. Combined score 15-1 in 2 games. So the finale is going to be big for Texas. I think obviously Arkansas, you want to get greedy and sweep that series because it totally changes kind of sweeps are just so impactful when you talk about pecking order stuff, postseason positioning. But from a Texas standpoint, they're really looking to salvage. And more than that, just leave it on a note that you can feel a little bit better about than the previous 2 games, which are more or less the fact that the Longhorns have been not really competitive. Wiley Fowler says, excuse me, now that the Vandy boys bats are heating up, should we start worrying about their pitching? We can't have nice things. I get it. I get that impulse. But man, the offense looked good last night. And oh, by the way, that's in large part because RJ Austin swung the bat really well. 4 for 5 last night, big home run late in that game. Just they're going to need him. They've been getting by largely without him, and the lineup has been doing a decent job. It's still not, a top third of the SEC type lineup, but it has been good enough when you consider how good the pitching's been and the fact that they really hadn't had much from RJ Austin. They were doing a nice job, and now if RJ Austin is heating up, obviously it takes them to the next level there. All right, scrolling through here. Yeah, Billy Derrick says RJ Austin returned to form last night. That's a really good sign for Vandy. Totally agree. James Rupert says, hot take, Tigers win both today in College Station. I wouldn't put that past them either. Again, doubleheaders just introduce so many variables, sweeps and doubleheaders. I think the conventional wisdom is that it's hard to sweep a doubleheader, and I get why people say that. But I actually feel like once game 1 is done, and whoever's won that, like I feel like it's almost just easy to keep that momentum going. So I think sweeps are probably more prevalent than most people would assume in doubleheaders, but I don't have any data to back that up. That's just kind of my like feeling and vibes. Aaron Simmerly says Ty Evans coming back in the lineup and hitting 2 homers of the last 2 games is big for Florida going forward, especially given that Colby Shelton was out of the lineup. So you were going to need somebody to, and Justin Nadeau had a nice game yesterday. So as long as Shelton's out, those guys are going to be more important. Aaron also says, looks like Peterson will pitch tomorrow. Okay. If they can win today, a sweep feels likely. Yeah. And Peterson, they were kind of in the same situation in Columbia. You know, they started the game and folks were kind of surprised they started the game. So, you know, it was Liam Peterson threw, I think it was just 7 pitches for Liam Peterson, and then got burned because they had to come off the field. So it sounds like for Florida that maybe Peterson is going to go tomorrow on Sunday. And so how long he goes will be interesting to see if they consider it, hey, yesterday was just a bullpen day kind of thing. And then I guess, you know, Tennessee could do that. I guess I dismissed the idea earlier, but perhaps if Kevin O'Sullivan thinks that's a safe thing to do, Kevin O'Sullivan in Florida are kind of famous for, especially in the scouting community, they're appreciated for, they tend to be pretty careful with their arms. And so if Kevin O'Sullivan is doing that, then yeah, I guess maybe I should give more credence to the idea that Doyle could maybe come back, and not today, but more likely tomorrow and maybe start a game. We'll see. Carl Dunn says, crossing fingers for a great day for LSU. Carl, you in this chat, you are not alone on that. Aaron also says doubleheaders can benefit teams that don't have good bullpens. I mean, that's a good point, because if you're trying to cover 18 innings in one day, like it really does level out the bullpens, because nobody has enough good bullpen arms unless you get really good starts. Nobody has enough bullpen arms to cover as much baseball as you have to cover in a doubleheader. Like very, very few teams. So you're right about that. All right. Josh Woolley says, if Gage Wood keeps progressing like this, wow, what a weapon. Agreed. He was awesome. And I'm intrigued by the idea of kind of like a Wood Gekkle piggyback just being what Arkansas does on those days, because boy, it worked. I mean, it worked last night. And Gekkle just looks so much more comfortable in a relief role. It's kind of funny how those things kind of work. But you know, my colleague, Mike Rooney, made a good point the other day when we were just talking about it. And he said, you know, Gekkle's a guy that every pitch is either a put away pitch or a pitch out of the zone. And for a reliever that's only going to throw 3 innings, you know, something like that, 3-4 innings, maybe, like you don't have to be quite so precious, right? That's okay. Like you might spray the ball a little bit, but you've got the stuff to work out of that. Whereas as a starter, your goals are different, right? You're trying to get through 5 or 6. And because Gekkle's not the most efficient pitcher, that can be kind of problematic. So, you know, you flip him a little bit, and it's just a different set of motivations, a different set of goals as a reliever. And that seems to be working for Gekkle. Josh Dycheski says, is today and tomorrow must wins for Ole Miss's hosting chances? Well, that's a good question. Let me, rather than just make it up off the top of my head, I'm scrolling over to the RPI page here. Yeah, it's certainly you can't get swept. I mean, that kind of goes without saying. But I would say a little bit, because their RPI is at 17, and you know, another loss in this series means at best they're coming out of the weekend 13-11, and that really does put Ole Miss right on that line. And if you have a 16-14 SEC regular season record, and maybe you go 0-1 or 1-1 in Hoover, but your RPI is 16, 17, 18, something like that, that's probably not going to do it. Now, I can't guarantee anything. Obviously, every committee is different, and this one's basically all new committee. But if their RPI is able to, if you're 16-14 in the regular season and your RPI is closer to 10, then that starts to get you into the conversation. Obviously, Ole Miss could also make a run in Hoover and win a couple of games, and who those wins are over will also matter, right? So yeah, if they get swept here, I mean, that puts them in a situation where they really got to work hard down the stretch. But I mean, winning the series keeps them right on track. Losing the series keeps them in the conversation for now. And then getting swept means you're probably going to have to overachieve down the stretch to get it done. So that's kind of how I would define it. But again, it's a moving target week to week. New Nerdcast will be out this coming week, and they'll be able to shed some more light on it. All right. Cameron Kaiser says, we got some baseball on now. That's correct. Yeah. 11 a.m. baseball Eastern this morning. So yeah, already kind of getting going. All right. Okay, Liz comes back and says announcers are saying no Liam Doyle for the rest of the weekend. So there you go. Tennessee making the decision that Liam Doyle is done for the weekend. And that's the safer play. Liam Doyle's agent might have run out of the stands and choked somebody if they tried to do something too crazy with with that situation going on with a valuable arm like his. I think there might have been some uproar there. But anyway, Judge Smales says, Joe, do you turn into an amateur meteorologist with all the weather going on? Unfortunately, yeah. Like I don't really have a lot of interest in it. I know some people really like to follow the weather. I don't, but I kind of have to because of this job. And not just in this situation where I'm like trying to figure out what games are going to come on where, but like if I'm traveling to games, like you do have to make some informed decisions on, okay, do I leave now? I mean, you guys as fans probably do too. Like if you're going to a game, like how likely is they start this on time? Do I leave now? Do I try to show up a little bit late? But what if I try to show up late and they do start on time? Like it's just a lot of variables that you can't control. And it's even as much as I feel like an amateur meteorologist, like coaches I know are like, I did not get into coaching to look at radars. And yet that's what they spend, especially this time of year. That's what they spend a lot of time doing is looking at radars. All right. Let's get to hitter and pitcher of the day here. I will share my screen out. All right. Hitter of the day there, RJ Austin. Not a tough decision, just from the standpoint of, it was a great game. 4 for 5, double homer, 4 RBIs, 3 runs scored, but also just in the context of Vanderbilt just needs him. He's got to, I don't want to say he has to be the guy that makes their lineup go, but he's got to be one of the small handful of guys who make their lineup go. That's just a non-negotiable for me, for Vanderbilt to be at whatever their peak is. But a huge game there in that 12-2 win over Alabama that was 8 innings due to the run rule. A couple of Georgia guys there on the list, Colby Branch, Slade Alford. Georgia won 9-2 over Mizzou. It was pretty tight. It was, I think, 1-0 into the 5th or 6th for Georgia. Mizzou, at least early in that game, pitched well enough to be competitive, and they were competitive through the middle innings, and then Georgia just kind of boat raced them down the stretch. But Colby Branch and Slade Alford big games there. Pierre Seals, a good game for Missouri, 2 for 4 with a double, a homer, and a walk. For Florida, Luke Heyman, Ty Evans, Justin Nato, 2 hits apiece there. I mentioned the importance of a guy like Nato. If Shelton's going to be out, somebody else on the infield has to step up, and Nato going 2 for 3 with a stolen base was big for Florida in that win over South Carolina. That was a 9-5 final. Come from behind. It was a 5-run 5th inning for the Gators that put them over the top, and they held on to the lead down the stretch. South Carolina got an early lead out there, but didn't end up being able to hold it. Jace Woida and Kennedy Jones, big games for South Carolina, 3 hits apiece there. Also for Vanderbilt, Brody Johnston, a 3 for 4 game, another guy that Vanderbilt would like to see get going in the right direction a little bit as he kind of deals with, the typical freshman fatigue that happens around this time of year. We'll see how the rest of his season finishes off, but certainly a big game there at 3 for 4. And then Brent Iredale for Arkansas in that 6-1 win over Texas, just 1 for 2 at the plate, but the one was a home run. He also walked and got hit by 2 pitches, so he reached base 4 times yesterday. Really, despite just the 1 hit, really a productive day at the plate for Brent Iredale. But hitter of the day is RJ Austin. I'm going to flip over to the pitchers here. And we talked a lot about the guy talked a lot already about the guy that I have as the pitcher of the day as I try to find it. There we go. Kyson Witherspoon, 7 shutout innings against Ole Miss. Really strong performance, but we had a lot of good starting candidates here. Brian Curley was one against Missouri, 7 shutout. J.D. Thompson, as you see down here, 7 shutout against Alabama. Gage Wood, Gabe Gekkle, Aiden Jimenez for Arkansas in their combined effort of 9 innings, gave up 5 hits and 1 run with 15 strikeouts. Brady Kellenbrink doesn't, on paper, just 4 1/3 innings, but when you consider how much Missouri has struggled to get someone who could even throw 4 1/3 innings in a start, much less 4 1/3 innings giving up one run that was on a solo home run. I mean, that quite honestly, this might sound like a joke, might be Missouri's best start in SEC play. Now, I don't know that. I'd have to go look at the box scores. I'm not going to, but that very well might be the best start when you consider opponent and the fact that, he kept them in the game, which has been few and far between. A couple relief efforts, Jake Clemente, him moving to the bullpen feels like it's been a huge thing for Florida. He's gone from being a guy who's an okay starter who could maybe give you 5 good innings, 6 if he's really cooking. But as a reliever, it's been a game changer. 3 strong innings there for him, 6 strikeouts in those 3 innings. He's a real weapon down the stretch. And you wonder if Florida can continue this momentum. You do wonder if maybe Jake Clemente is the Brandon Neely of this year. Now, I don't think he's at Brandon Neely's level necessarily, but there are a lot of similarities in that they both had success as relievers. There was an attempt to put them in the rotation, just like with Brandon Neely. Clemente's has made that attempt. It was fine, but not great, and then ultimately ends up back in the bullpen where they really shine. So I think that's maybe how Florida looks to use him. And obviously, if he's 75% of what Brandon Neely was, Florida's going to be really, really happy with that. And then Ryder Greeno for South Carolina, 3 hitless innings, gave up 1 run, but 3 hitless innings for the Gamecocks down the stretch there to at least give the team a chance to come back. Ultimately fell short, but did give them a chance to win that game in the end. But congrats to Kyson Witherspoon, probably his 3rd or 4th pitcher of the day honor this season. I really should start tracking these things, but well, it's a little late now. Next season, 2026, maybe Joe will start tracking hitter and pitcher of the day on Weekend Waypoints. All right. Sean says, Nerdcast update. Felt like all the regional host bubbles popped the bed yesterday, Sean. Is that supposed to be did the bubbles pop or did they poop the bed? Which one are you going for there? TCU, Oregon, Kansas, Louisville, Irvine, East Carolina, even NC State pushing for a national seed loses to Miami. Yeah, I mean, I don't really think East Carolina was in that mix. Like they're going to struggle to make the postseason. I just don't think they're very good. But yeah, but the others, yeah, TCU, Oregon, Kansas, Louisville, Irvine, NC, those are all teams that are in that conversation. And Irvine feels like a particularly difficult. Okay, yeah, the poop emoji. Okay, yeah, poop the bed. There you go. Irvine feels like the one that's on like the narrowest because it's just. They already are going to have to play some games against bad RPI teams in that league. And so you just can't. And Josh Dyczewski says Irvine will be fine as long as they take 2 or 3. Yeah, I think you're probably right. But it's just like their path is so much narrower just because unlike some of these other teams that are in the power leagues, you're just not going to get a lot of RPI help. And furthermore, you're going to get hurtful RPIs in the Big West in a way that you won't necessarily even in the Big 12 and Big 10 and ACC. So, all right, that is going to do it, folks, for this edition of Weekend Waypoints, production of SEC Extra at D1Baseball.com. I should mention, too, I talk about the Nerdcast as if I assume everybody knows what that is, but and I know many of you do, but around middle of the week, usually Tuesday, Wednesday, Mark Etheridge, my colleague at SEC Extra, Kendall Rogers, and Aaron Fitt do a podcast on the main D1 baseball feed that they call the Nerdcast, and that's literally they've been live streaming it too, but it's typically during the middle of the workday on a weekday. But so you can watch the video, you can watch them do it live, or you can listen to it on the podcast. They put together the field of 64. They go literally like conference by conference. They go 1 through 16 of the host sites. It can be a lengthy process. Some weeks are more difficult than others, but I find it interesting to listen to, even for someone like me who follows this stuff pretty closely. Those guys have different perspectives than I do. They're watching different games than I am. So I do learn a lot listening to it in what's going on in other regions of the country. So as we get down the stretch here, even if you're just mainly focused on your team, that can be a helpful listen to kind of get a feel for the rest of the league, the rest of the country, I should say. And also, just to give you an idea of who are teams we might run into, like who are teams my team is competing with for a host spot or a national seed or a bubble situation, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's a plug for the Nerdcast, main D1 baseball feed. So check that out if you have a chance. All right. I will talk to you guys tomorrow morning, Sunday morning, as we wrap up the weekend. Hopefully, fingers crossed, hopefully the rain allows most, if not all, of the games to get played today. So our Sunday doesn't end up being kind of wonky with 7-inning games and so on and so forth. One more question here. Jeremy Scott says, will y'all do a show before the SEC tournament? TBD, Jeremy, we're not going to do a live show. Mark's travel schedule is such that he is not getting into Hoover until Tuesday, the day when games start. So no in-person live show. Last year we did a live stream preview show. It is still the plan to do that. We're still just working out the logistics on that. So yes, there will be a preview show. It's just a matter of who all is involved in what format, what time it is. But we will communicate that as we get a little closer to being in Hoover once we have some details there. So I will make sure y'all know about that as we get closer. But a good question, Jeremy. Thank you for bringing it up. All right, folks, I'll talk to y'all tomorrow. Enjoy the baseball today. See you then.